I don't need you, just your DNA. Her cold words hung in the air between them as his eyes darkened with a fury she hadn't expected from the quiet single father. My child isn't a commodity, he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion that would change both their lives forever. Stay with us to discover how one man's powerful response to a billionaire's proposition transformed two broken souls. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected connection and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt content that reminds us what truly matters in life. Alexandra Winters stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse office, gazing down at Manhattan with the detached interest of someone who owned half the skyline. At 38, she had everything money could buy, except time. The fertility specialist's words echoed in her mind. Your options are becoming limited, Ms. Winters. She turned away from the window, her Louboutins clicking sharply against the marble floor as she returned to her desk. The dossier lay open, displaying the profile of one James Connor. Single father. 35. Exceptional genetics. Perfect health history. And most importantly, financially vulnerable enough that her offer would be difficult to refuse. Alexandra didn't believe in love, not anymore. Not after watching her parents' loveless marriage, not after her own failed engagement to a man who wanted her fortune more than her heart. She wanted a child, an heir, someone to leave her empire to. She didn't want the complications of a husband or the messiness of relationships. Just a baby. Her baby. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Connor is here for his interview, Ms. Winters. Alexandra straightened her tailored suit jacket. Send him in. James Connor wasn't what she expected. The photograph in his file hadn't captured the quiet dignity in his posture or the warmth in his eyes. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, clean but clearly not expensive. His hands, she noticed, were calloused from work. Thank you for coming, Mr. Connor, she said, not bothering to stand. Please, sit. He sat across from her, his movements careful and deliberate. Your assistant mentioned this was about the landscaping position at your estate in Connecticut? Alexandra studied him for a moment. That was merely a pretext to meet you. I have a different proposition. His brow furrowed slightly. I don't understand. I'll be direct, Mr. Connor. I'm looking for a sperm donor. Someone with excellent genetics, intelligence, and physical attributes. Your profile is exceptional. I'm prepared to offer you $500,000. The silence that followed was deafening. James stared at her, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Excuse me, he finally managed. I want a child, Mr. Connor. I don't want a relationship or a co-parent. I simply want a baby, and you have the genetic material I'm looking for. The process would be clinical and discreet. You would sign away all parental rights, of course. James's face hardened. And why me? There are sperm banks for this sort of thing. Alexandra leaned forward. Anonymous donors lack verification. I've researched you thoroughly. Your medical history is impeccable. Your daughter is gifted, top of her class despite your modest circumstances. You have the qualities I want for my child. My daughter, James said quietly, is not a product of good genetics. She's who she is because she's loved. Alexandra waved her hand dismissively. Nature versus nurture. I'm prepared to provide the best of both. James stood up slowly. I don't need you, just your DNA. Her cold words hung in the air between them as his eyes darkened with a fury she hadn't expected from the quiet single father. My child isn't a commodity, he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. And neither am I. My daughter lost her mother when she was 4. Every day, I watch her look for pieces of her mom in herself, the shape of her smile, the sound of her laugh. DNA isn't just genetic material, Ms. Winters. It's legacy. It's connection. It's family. Alexandra felt something unfamiliar stir within her, discomfort, perhaps. Or shame. "I'm offering you financial security," she said, her voice less certain now. "For you and your daughter." James shook his head. "What you're offering is money in exchange for creating a child who will grow up wondering why half of who they are didn't want to know them." He moved toward the door. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Ms. Winters, but it won't be from me." As the door closed behind him, Alexandra remained frozen at her desk, his words echoing in her mind. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her, really looked at her, and seen not the billionaire CEO, but a woman so disconnected from humanity that she thought parenthood could be transactional. 3 weeks later, Alexandra found herself driving through a modest neighborhood in Queens, questioning her own sanity. She'd been unable to forget James Connor's words or the look in his eyes. Something about him had pierced the armor she'd spent decades building. She parked her Bentley outside a small community garden where, according to her investigator, James volunteered on Saturday mornings with his daughter. Alexandra watched from a distance as he knelt beside a little girl with dark curls, patiently showing her how to plant seedlings. The child laughed, a bright, uninhibited sound that carried across the garden. James smiled in response, and Alexandra felt an unexpected ache in her chest. When was the last time anyone had looked at her with such unguarded joy? Before she could reconsider, Alexandra stepped out of her car and walked toward them. James noticed her immediately, his body tensing as he stood protectively closer to his daughter. "Mr. Connor," Alexandra said, suddenly unsure of herself. "I was hoping we could talk." "Lily," James said to his daughter, "can you help Mr. Rodriguez with the tomato plants for a few minutes?" The little girl looked curiously at Alexandra before nodding and skipping off to an elderly man across the garden. "What are you doing here?" James asked, his voice low. Alexandra took a deep breath. "I wanted to apologize. You were right. About everything." James crossed his arms, waiting. "I've spent my entire life building walls," she continued. "Treating people like assets or obstacles. I convinced myself that I could approach parenthood the same way I approach acquisitions." She glanced at Lily, who was carefully placing a seedling in the soil. "But watching you with your daughter, I realize how wrong I was." "Why are you telling me this?" James asked. Alexandra met his gaze directly. "Because I've never apologized to anyone before. And because I'd like to make a different kind of proposition." James raised an eyebrow. "Dinner," she said. "Just dinner. No contracts, no propositions. Just two people talking. I'd like to understand how you do it. How you build something real with another person." James studied her for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Completely." He glanced at his daughter, then back to Alexandra. "One dinner. As friends. Nothing more." Alexandra nodded, feeling strangely vulnerable. "As friends." That dinner led to another, and then another. Alexandra met Lily properly, a precocious 8-year-old who asked Alexandra why she wore stabby shoes, and whether she knew that bees were responsible for every third bite of food humans eat. Weeks turned into months. Alexandra found herself spending weekends at community gardens and weeknight evenings helping Lily with science projects. She learned that James had been an architectural engineer before his wife's death, giving up his career to work flexible hours that allowed him to be there for his daughter. For the first time in her life, Alexandra began to see wealth as something other than power or security. She established a scholarship fund for the community center where James volunteered. She used her connections to help secure grants for the garden. Not as transactions, but as genuine contributions. And somewhere along the way, she fell in love, not just with James, but with the idea of family as something built through care rather than obligation or biology. One evening, as they sat on James's modest porch after Lily had gone to bed, Alexandra found the courage to speak the truth. "I was wrong about what I wanted," she said softly. I didn't just want a baby. I wanted what you have with Lily. That connection. That love. But I was too afraid to be vulnerable enough to build it properly. James took her hand, his touch gentle. We're all afraid, Alexandra. Parenthood is terrifying. Love is terrifying. The difference is whether we let that fear control us or whether we move through it. I don't know if I know how, she admitted. Nobody does, he said with a small smile. We just try. Every day, we try. 1 year after their first meeting, Alexandra stood in the same community garden where she had sought out James and Lily. The space had been transformed with her financial support, but under James's vision, expanded to include an educational center for children and a farmer's market for local residents. Lily ran up to her, soil smudged on her cheek. Alex. Dad says the strawberries are ready. Come see. Alexandra let herself be pulled along, marveling at how this child had so effortlessly claimed a piece of her heart. James watched them from across the garden, his eyes warm with an emotion that still made Alexandra's breath catch. Later that evening, as they walked through the garden at sunset, James stopped beneath a trellis covered in climbing roses. You know, he said, when you first made your proposition, I thought you were the most arrogant person I'd ever met. Alexandra laughed. I was. No, he said, taking her hands in his. You were lost. There's a difference. He took a deep breath. I have a proposition for you now. Alexandra felt her heart skip. Oh. James knelt down, pulling a small box from his pocket. I don't want your money or your empire. I just want you, your heart, your mind, your soul. I want to build a family with you, Alexandra. Not because of genetics or legacy, but because I love you. Tears filled Alexandra's eyes as she looked down at the simple ring, nothing like the ostentatious diamond her former fiancé had given her. Lily and I come as a package deal, James continued. And I know that's asking a lot. It's not asking enough, Alexandra interrupted, pulling him to his feet. You've given me something I never thought I'd have. A chance to be part of something real. She touched his face gently. Yes. My answer is yes. 2 years later, Alexandra sat in a hospital room, cradling her newborn son while Lily peered at her baby brother with wonder. James sat beside them, his arm around Alexandra, his eyes filled with tears of joy. He has your eyes, Alexandra whispered to James. And your determination, James replied with a smile. Did you see how he fought the nurses? Alexandra looked down at her son, then at her stepdaughter, then at her husband. The empire she had built seemed insignificant compared to this family they had created together. Thank you, she said softly. For what? James asked. For showing me that the things worth having can't be bought. She kissed her son's forehead.